Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving into some fascinating research you sent us about what motivates us to actually do the things we need to do. And we're not just talking about big picture motivation like, I'm going to ace this class. We're getting granular,
Right.
looking at what motivates us to tackle individual tasks, especially in academics.
That's a great way to put it. It's about understanding the nitty-gritty
Okay.
of our daily choices, why we choose to do one task over another,
Yeah.
even when they're both important.
Exactly. And to set the scene, this particular study focused on undergraduate students in a 5-week accelerated online summer course
Right.
about the science of food and cooking.
Now, you might be thinking, why food science? Why online? But that's actually what makes this research so interesting.
Okay, I'm listening. Tell me why this is such a perfect setting for studying motivation.
Well, first,
Mhm.
it's summer. Students are juggling other commitments,
Yeah.
maybe vacations or jobs, so their motivation is already being pulled in different directions.
Got it. So there's already a bit of a time crunch. And what about the online aspect?
That's key.
Yeah.
In online learning, students have a ton of autonomy. They choose when and how they engage with the material, so their personal motivational systems really come into play. It's not like a traditional classroom where there's a set schedule
Mhm.
and everyone's working the same thing at the same times.
It's a high-stakes environment with a lot of freedom and flexibility. That's a recipe for some really interesting motivational dynamics.
Exactly. And to add another layer, this wasn't just a loosey-goosey online course. It was quite structured with set deadlines for various assessments,
Yeah.
exams, pre-lesson quizzes, reading guides, weekly review quizzes, discussion posts, even course evaluations.
Wow, that's a lot to juggle. Even without the summer distractions, it sounds like a pressure cooker for motivation.
You could say that. And what's surprising is that despite the course being graded, a significant number of students didn't complete all the assessments.
Now that's interesting. It makes you wonder if grades alone aren't enough to keep everyone on track, especially when there's so much to do.
It certainly challenges the assumption that grades are the be-all and end-all of academic motivation. There's clearly more to the story.
Which brings us to the heart of this research, the idea that motivation isn't just about the subject itself, it's about our feelings towards specific tasks. So, even if you love cooking, you might dread writing that weekly lab report, but be excited to try out a new recipe for the discussion forum.
Exactly. This study digs deeper into what motivates us on a task-by-task level, and it introduces this concept of situated expectancy value theory.
Okay, that sounds pretty academic. Break it down for me. What's situated expectancy value theory all about?
Essentially, it means that our motivation isn't static. It changes based on the situation,
Mm-hmm.
the task,
Mm.
and even our own internal state.
So it's not just I'm a motivated person or I'm not motivated. It's more nuanced than that.
Exactly. It recognizes that motivation can fluctuate, depending on all sorts of factors. How interesting the task is,
Yeah.
how much effort it requires,
Mhm.
what else we have to give up to do it, even how we're feeling that day.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like
So,
I might be super motivated to go for a run on a sunny morning, but if it's pouring rain and I'm feeling tired, my motivation to lace up my sneakers plummets.
exactly. And this study takes that idea
Mm.
and applies it to academic tasks. It says, let's not just look at math motivation or science motivation as a whole. Let's zoom in and see how motivation plays out for each specific assignment and what factors influence those choices.
So how did they actually measure this? It's not like they can just peer into students' brains and see their motivation levels.
Oh, right.
Right.
They couldn't read minds, but they did get pretty creative. They had students keep detailed logs of their daily activities, both course-related and non-course related,
Yeah.
over the course of a week. Then, for each of those tasks, students rated a bunch of factors.
Like what?
They started with some classic elements of task value, like how interesting was the task and how high was the opportunity cost.
Hold on. Opportunity cost sounds like something from an economics textbook. What does that mean in this context?
Well, that's a fancy way of saying,
Mhm.
what else do you have to give up to do this task?
Okay, so if I have a history essay due tomorrow, but I also really want to go see that new movie with my friends, watching the movie has a high opportunity cost because I'm sacrificing study time.
Exactly. So the researchers had students rate both the interest level and the opportunity cost of each task. But here's where things get really interesting. They also factored in the intriguing element of anticipated emotions.
Anticipated emotions, that's a new one for me. What are we talking about here?
They asked students to imagine how they would feel if they completed
Hmm.
or didn't complete each task. Specifically, they focused on anticipated satisfaction, the positive feeling you expect if you get something done,
Hmm.
and anticipated regret, that sinking feeling of, ugh, I should have done that.
So it's not just about the task itself, but also the emotional consequences we imagine, both good and bad. That's fascinating.
It really adds a layer of complexity to how we understand motivation. It's not just about logic and reason. It's also about our feelings and how we anticipate those feelings, influencing our actions.
That's so true. We all know that feeling of dread when we think about a task we've been putting off. It's like we can practically feel the regret building up.
Exactly. And this research suggests that those anticipated emotions can be powerful drivers of our behavior, sometimes even more powerful than the objective value of the task itself.
This is really making me think about my own to-do list in a whole new light. But before we go too far down that rabbit hole, I'm curious to know how the researchers took all of this data about task value, anticipated emotions, and actual task completion
Right.
and made sense of it. How did they figure out if these factors actually predicted which tasks students would prioritize and complete?
That's where things get even more fascinating, and that's what we'll explore in the next part of the deep dive.
Ooh, a cliffhanger. Don't worry, listeners. We'll be right back to unpack all of that after a quick break.
All right, we're back. Before we went on a tangent talking about my to-do list, you were about to tell us how the researchers analyzed all that data on student motivation. They had the task logs, the interest ratings, the opportunity cost, and the anticipated emotions. What did they do with all of that information?
Well, they used a statistical technique called cluster analysis, which essentially groups individuals based on patterns in their data, in this case. It was about grouping students based on their motivational profiles.
So instead of just looking at individual tasks, they look for trends in how students approach their work overall.
Exactly. And they ended up identifying 6 distinct motivational profiles, each with its own unique combination of those key factors: interest cost,
Yeah.
anticipated satisfaction, and anticipated regret.
Okay, 6 profiles. Lay them on me.
The first one they called high emotions, high cost. These are the tasks that students find really interesting, but they come with a high opportunity cost. So, things you really want to do, but they require sacrificing something else you value.
Exactly. And not only is the interest high, but so are the anticipated emotions. Students in this profile expect to feel a lot of satisfaction if they complete the task, and a lot of regret if they don't.
High stakes, high rewards, and a lot of potential for emotional turmoil. What about the next profile?
The second one is more middle of the road. They called it medium emotions, medium cost.
So, these are the tasks that are kind of meh across the board.
Pretty much
Moderate
interest, moderate cost, moderate anticipated satisfaction, and regret. Nothing too extreme in any direction.
Got it. The whatever tasks. What's next?
The third profile is intriguing. It's called low cost, high satisfaction.
Okay. Low cost. High satisfaction. Those sound like my kind of tasks. Tell me more.
These are the tasks that are pretty easy to do, so the opportunity cost is low. But interestingly, despite maybe not being the most interesting, they offer a surprising amount of satisfaction upon completion.
I can relate to that. It's like finally cleaning out that junk drawer. It might not be the most thrilling task, but the feeling of accomplishment afterwards is undeniable. What about the fourth profile?
That one's called high emotions, low cost.
Yeah.
And it's similar to the first profile in that students find these tasks highly interesting and anticipate strong emotions. But the key difference is the low opportunity cost.
So, things you're really pumped about that don't require you to sacrifice much, those sound pretty ideal from a motivational standpoint.
They definitely seem to have a winning combination. All right, on to the fifth profile. And this one is a bit of a head scratcher. They called it high regret.
High regret. Okay, that doesn't sound promising. What's that all about?
As the name suggests, these tasks are all about the anticipated regret. They're
Yeah.
low on interest, low cost,
Yeah.
and don't offer much anticipated satisfaction. But students expect to feel a ton of regret if they don't do them.
It's like the I really should but tasks. You know you'll feel bad if you don't do them, but you just can't seem to muster the motivation.
Exactly. And finally, we have the low emotions, low cost profile.
Let me guess: low interest, low cost, low satisfaction,
Right.
low regret. The tasks that just don't elicit any strong feelings one way or the other.
You nailed it. They're the tasks that kind of blend into the background noise of our to-do lists. Okay. So we've got our 6 profiles. But the real question is, did these profiles actually predict which tasks students completed? Did the high emotions folks follow through? Did the high regret group actually get things done despite their lack of enthusiasm?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is. And the answer is Uh, Drum roll, please. It's complicated, but we'll break it all down for you right after this.
All right, no more drum rolls or cliffhangers. Let's get to the heart of the matter. Did those motivational profiles actually predict which tasks students completed?
Well, the researchers found that the two most common profiles were, unsurprisingly, high emotions, high cost, and high emotions, low cost. So tasks that were highly interesting and emotionally engaging, and, as you might expect, students were most likely to expect to complete those tasks. It seems like the combination of interest and those anticipated feelings, both positive and negative, was a strong motivator to at least get started.
Makes sense. We tend to prioritize things we're excited about, or things that will make us feel really good,
Yeah.
or help us avoid feeling really bad once they're done.
Exactly. But here's the catch, and this is where the cost factor really comes into play. While students were equally likely to expect to complete both high-cost and low-cost tasks when they were high interest, they were significantly more likely to actually complete the low-cost tasks.
So even when we're super motivated, the practical realities of time and energy still matter. Like that feeling when you're all gung-ho about cleaning the whole house. But then you realize how much effort it's actually going to take, and suddenly just decluttering your desk seems way more appealing.
That's a perfect analogy. It seems like we can sometimes underestimate the true cost of a task when we're caught up in that initial wave of motivation. Or perhaps we just naturally prioritize tasks that fit more easily into our busy schedules.
So it's not just about finding tasks we love, but also finding tasks that are manageable within the constraints of our lives. Makes sense. Now, what about that high regret group? The tasks that are low on everything except for that anticipated feeling of, ooh, I should have done that. Did those actually get done?
Surprisingly, no.
Hmm.
Even though students would feel a lot of regret if they didn't complete these tasks,
Yeah.
they weren't actually more likely to do them.
So even the threat of major guilt isn't always enough to get us moving. Huh. That's actually kind of reassuring. But it does
Yeah.
make me wonder, when does regret actually work as a motivator?
That's a great question. The study suggests that regret is most effective when it's paired with other motivational factors, not when it's flying solo. Think about it. If you're not interested in a task, it doesn't offer much satisfaction,
Hmm.
and it's not that hard to do. Even a hefty dose of regret might not be enough to outweigh all those other negatives.
So it's not enough to just tell ourselves, if I don't do this, I'll regret it.
Mhm.
We need something more to latch onto something that makes the task itself more appealing.
Exactly. And it's interesting, the researchers found that the high regret profile was most often associated with quizzes and exams.
Which makes sense. You might not enjoy studying for a physics exam, but you sure as heck don't want to fail it either.
Exactly. The potential consequences are a big motivator,
Yeah.
even if the task itself isn't that thrilling. And this actually leads to another intriguing finding about those discussion posts. Remember,
Mhm.
they were a key component of this online course.
Right. And those were interesting because they involved interacting with other students, which adds a social element to the mix.
Exactly. And what the researchers found was that discussion posts were associated with two very different motivational profiles: high emotions, low cost, and low emotions, low cost.
So some students were really into the discussions, while others saw them as more of a chore.
That's a great way to put it. For some students, those discussions were a chance to engage with the material in a meaningful way, to share their ideas,
Yeah.
to learn from others. For others, they were just another box to check.
It highlights how even within a structured environment, people's motivations can be so different. And it makes me think about how important it is to create learning experiences that tap into those diverse motivational systems.
Absolutely. It's not enough to just assign tasks, even if they're graded. We need to consider how to make those tasks relevant and engaging, recognizing that what motivates one student might not motivate another.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into academic motivation, what's the big takeaway for our listeners? You sent us this research because you were curious about understanding your own motivation better.
Yes, exactly. And I think the key takeaway is that motivation is incredibly complex. It's not a fixed trait, but rather a dynamic process that's constantly influenced by a whole range of factors. The task itself, the context, our emotions, our goals, even our beliefs about our own abilities.
That's a really powerful insight. It means we're not stuck with a certain level of motivation. We can actually change and adapt our approach based on what we learn about ourselves. So if someone's listening to this and they're struggling with procrastination or just feeling unmotivated in general, what would you say to them?
I'd say, start by paying attention to your own motivational patterns. Think about the tasks you gravitate towards, the ones you dread, the ones you always seem to put off. Try to identify what's driving
Mm.
or not driving. Your motivation in those situations is at the interest level,
Mm.
the perceived cost, the anticipated emotions. Once you have a better understanding of your own motivational profile,
Mm.
you can start to experiment with strategies that work for you.
So it's not about finding a one-size-fits-all solution. It's about personalized approaches.
Aye.
I love that. And maybe that's the most important lesson from this deep dive. Motivation isn't a mystery. It's something we can understand, influence, and ultimately use to our advantage.
Well said.
Thanks for joining us on this fascinating exploration of academic motivation. And if you're listening to this and you have your own research you'd like to deep dive into, send it our way. We'd love to explore it with you. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep those motivational fires burning.